All right, all right, all right. We're here. Oh, dang it. I forgot to fill up my water bottle. Damn it. There's been a rush today. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's doing well. It's good to see you all in the chat as well. Rustam, Zayat, Justine, Victoria, Galazar, Eden, Lily, and Gal. Oh, sorry, I said Galazar twice. What? Enjoy that special moment of recognition. But yeah, hope everyone is doing well. Let me switch on over. Let's see. Everything working? Oh, there we go. Let me zoom in a little bit. Just finished laser gaming with my friends. I'm beat. Oh, that sounds awesome, though. That sounds awesome. I've never done it myself. I've always been... I've been paintballing like multiple times. And I do really enjoy that. I mean, to be fair, it's been like ages. Ages! Can't even remember the last time we went. But yeah, it's been such nice weather as well. I guess laser gaming you do that inside, but still, you know. Just soaking up the sun. Such a beautiful day. But yeah, how has everyone's week been? It's been God, it's been freaking chaos in game land again. Oh, at least in the games industry. God dang it, what is happening? Just give us a break, please. Isn't it always chaos? No bad news. Oh, there's always more bad news to come, baby. I don't know, like that's the current industry trend. I guess this, well, no, I was gonna say, I guess this is not necessarily bad news, but it is, so. God dang it. What's the news? God, I suck at even keeping track of this, but like Sony shut down like one of their big studios that did like the massive remasters, right? I guess that broke last week because I can remember talking about this. Maybe we talked about this on Friday already. But they shut down Bluepoint Studios, which is like freaking crazy. Yeah. So Bluepoint no longer exists, which is freaking crazy. A bunch of talented people on the market. And then also, yeah, the weird shenanigans that are happening with like Xbox and just like Phil retiring. So Phil Spencer is no longer at Xbox. Well, technically he still is because he's still advising Xbox, right? But he's no longer a part of, well, officially of Xbox. So he's retiring, and then the person who everyone thought was gonna be the person who was gonna follow him up just up and left. Sarah Bond just like up and left, just resigned on the spot. It's like fucking crazy. That was like, you know, like the whole Phil Spencer thing. I was like, okay, because they spoke about it like a while ago, blah blah blah, and there was like, I mean, there's something there, right? But then like that your follow up just says like, peace, I'm out. And then now all this weird stuff is coming up where a lot of people are, yeah, like there's multiple reports that say that people praise her for her connections and her ability to speak to devs and building bridges between different studios, but that otherwise she was like really hard to work with. Yeah, which is very interesting. And then now we have Asha Sharma, I believe her name is, who is a former CEO of, well, the former head or CEO from the core AI business from Microsoft, now running the Xbox division. You know, and you can already guess how that went. You know, so yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Maybe think that some crazy plans are in play under the hood. Yeah, I think so, right? And I've been watching some news about this, like people talking about it. And it's interesting, some of the takes, because to a certain degree it makes sense that if you have a big thing like this come out where, hey, like Phil Spencer is retiring. This is his official retirement date, right? It makes sense to then also just say like, hey, look, if we're doing a succession plan, we're not gonna then, if we already feel somewhat uncomfortable with Sarah Bond like taking over, we're not gonna put her in that position because that doesn't make sense, right? So it might as well make sense to just be like, hey, look, we're just gonna completely do a reset. Phil Spencer's out, we got a new person in, that's it, you know? But yeah, we will see. We will see. It is interesting. It's interesting watching this all unravel though. God, it's so chaotic. I mean, to be fair, like this, like sort of shuffling around with like the CEOs, like who knows where that is gonna go? You know, she might as well be really, like really good. It might be a bad sign. Who knows? Time will tell. But yeah, because the thing is, they can say whatever they want, right? And this is something that I really believe in. Like actions are more powerful than words. So like all the stuff that's being said right now, you know, she's putting in a lot of work and she's being very active and very proactive, asking a lot of questions. Sure, that's all good, but I want to see where the actions are going in the future. So I guess time will tell. Honestly, I think RAM shortage AI thing is another reason why stylized games are the future. People can't afford new tech. Yeah. Illidank is basically going to say the same thing, right? Slide doesn't mean optimize. You can still make realistic art without it eating insane resources. Yes, you can. And there's also like a lot of stylized games that probably eat like a ton of resources too, right? So the style doesn't determine like how optimized it is. However, I will say that I think, and listening to a lot of news and a lot of analysts out there, that a lot of companies are now pushing more stylized art because oftentimes it is cheaper to produce. And again, this is generalizing, right? But it is cheaper to produce in terms of like the amount of manpower that you need and the amount of, I don't know, developers that you need on making those resources, right? It's no longer about like the fine detail about like making the dirt on like, I don't know, this little crevice in this thing. No, it's just like it can be solved on like a shader basis in a lot of cases, right? Which is really interesting. So yeah, I'm curious how that is gonna sort of bounce against the perception that we've always had from like AAA, right? Where if you want to make a AAA game, oftentimes that also means that you're gonna go for like hyper realistic or realistic, right? That's oftentimes going hand in hand, right? So I'm curious where that is going to go, where the perception of high fidelity graphics is still like entangled with AAA as an idea, right? So I'm curious to see where that is going to go. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I find it interesting just more in terms of that we've gotten to the point where development cycles are so long and so expensive and there's not enough money coming into the space coming from like venture capital and all that kind of stuff, right? That it actually put pressure on making art cheaper, which is like, sure, I mean, it makes sense, right? But now there's a concerted effort of like scoping down like the art side of things, which is pretty interesting. I'm also not imagining that there's going to be a drastic shift that, like, for example, all the big games are going to be stylized all of a sudden. But I think what we can see, or what we're going to see, is probably more of a shift like's already happening with like the Horizon series, right? Where they're currently not making a mainline game, but then they do like this spin-off thing that is more stylistic and it tries to expand the marketing or the core audience or the IP. I think Rare Sea of Thieves was a great mix between AAA graphics sliding into water with beautiful stylized art style. Yeah, it's a thing where I'm not even saying that I don't think that AAA can't mean stylized, right? But I think the public's perception oftentimes is very much linked to the two. Yeah. Charlie saying Sea of Thieves was great. It's a shame about Everwild. That was rare, right? Yep. Yeah, yeah. But also, they worked on that game for like 10, 11 years already, you know? And I think reporting came out that it didn't even have like a solid core loop yet, which is just, which is mental, right? That is crazy. Think about this in your lifetime, right? Let's say you join a studio. What would be a good example of this? I mean, there's a couple of examples that I can bring up, right? So let's say if that is a game that you work on, you can ship 4 games in your life, and that's it. That's retirement age, right? And that is always crazy to think about to me. Like that is like way too long to work on something. And I think how much it sucks to say it, but sometimes it's also a skill to know when to not pursue a thing that is not going to pan out, you know? And I feel that sometimes, I don't know, higher ups have forgotten the skill, or I don't know. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, you know? But yeah, I really wonder how dev hell like that happens in these big studios. I think sunk cost fallacy has a lot to do with it, right? Where you've already put in so much time and effort and money that at this point might as well try to push it out, right? Because it's like, what else are we gonna do? You know, we've already put so much time and effort into it, and I think that has a lot to do with it. I think what's also interesting now is that if you put out a good game, right? If the game's good, it's not gonna go anywhere. It has to be freaking great because the competition in the space is so strong now that if you release a game that is like, ooh, I guess we didn't hit it on like initial release, we're gonna keep working on it and make it better, you know? That doesn't happen. You can put out, you can point to a couple of outliers, let's say like Cyberpunk, right? Maybe you could even point at like Hello Games, but they have a smaller team, which gives them like way more runway, right? Because they had like a strong initial sales, and that gave them like a lot of runway to do like all the stuff that they're doing now, right? But at a AAA level, if you have like, I don't know, like 500, 600 developers or something like that working on a game, if you don't get that initial spike, it's done, right? It's crazy. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think also how dev hell like that happens. And I'm thinking about this a lot, right? And I don't know how to word it just yet. But I think there's a shared responsibility that is lost between different developers. I think sometimes you get this by, they call it like toxic positivity, and there's all these other like keywords for it, right? I think sometimes because the industry is so big and so solidified now, that you as a new person coming into like an established development, it makes sense that you don't feel like you have a voice, right? Especially in a time when, let's say for example now, where are you going to speak up if you even have the perception of it maybe costing your job in this like environment? No one's going to speak up, you know? And it's something that not a lot of companies foster. I think you need to foster that, yeah, that culture of just being like open about that stuff and just being like, hey, look, the game sucks. What are we going to do about it, right? Because if you listen to a documentary about Arc Raiders, I think it was a documentary from NoClip, they are actually like pretty open about that. They said that like Arc Raiders at some point was really, really close of being on the chopping block, you know? And then they just did like, they had like a specific name for it. They basically overhauled the whole game and did like a big push to make it like an even better, or like a better game than it was back then. And I think you need that, right? But if you don't have that to a certain level, then yeah, there's just leaving opportunity on the table, right? Because if you think about it, like, you have so much creative people inside of one studio that it's almost a shame that you don't make use of it, you know? If you have all this creative yeah, just you have a creative powerhouse. You have like 500 people working in a company. Like there's an opportunity there, right? That oftentimes gets missed. The shift from PvE against big machines to extraction shooter was a big gambit. But hell, it worked out for them. Yeah, it definitely did. It definitely did. There is something about so here's the weird thing, right? I love PvE games. Like I've been pretty much like a solo player and all that kind of stuff, but if you want to make a game like that takes off and becomes really popular, I honestly don't think that you can do it without PvP. Because you lose the tension, you know? There's no tension. If you just go inside of a map and then you hunt down big monsters, then it's like cool, but there's nothing that gets stale like really quick, right? Because that also allows you to really find out like the meta. You get like really good at min-maxing the game, and then the game gets boring really quick, right? Where if you have a PvP angle of it, now the meta is like other players that are also constantly trying to improve what they're doing, which is where actually the stuff that they're doing, that Embark is doing with LLMs, using that as just like AI data, right? And not AI as in like the other AI that we talk about, right? But like just making smarter enemy behavior in the game, and have them, you know, self train how they move and all that kind of stuff. That is interesting because it adds this sort of like evolving nature to these machines, right? But there is still a reason why they chose to then go for PvP, right? Because I don't think it's an awesome technology, right? And I think it's going to be developing further in the future, but I don't think we're at a stage where it becomes like really fun and really dependable in sort of like a game dev way. But yeah. It's important that people don't take it personally. Yeah. It is. I think when it comes to feedback, right, that's probably the most important thing that you can do. I don't know if people have seen, but I've personally implemented a shift in the way that I give feedback now. Maybe not on what we're gonna do today, right? But on the portfolio side, I've become a little bit more black and white. Because I think it also helps to like build up that skill of just getting like, hey, look, I'm gonna tell you how it is, and I'm gonna give you context, and I'm gonna give you, you know, helpful tips and all that kind of stuff how you can work with it. But I'm still gonna give it to you like raw, basically, right? Because otherwise there's a little bit too much tiptoeing, I felt. And I think if you then think about that happening, but on a company-wide level, right? Or, well, it has multiple gradients, right? First is like your team. If your team is not supporting this kind of a culture and is kind of stifling like you speaking up whenever it matters, right? Or it doesn't like actively promote it, then you as a team are already losing that edge, right? But then you can also see it on like a studio level and then a manager level. So you have all these levels that have to be like open and honest and really drive that culture forward. Because it is nice if it happens in a team, but then once your lead says like, hey, look, we've got all this like amazing feedback, here's what we came up with. If it still like doesn't go anywhere else, then what's the point, right? So it needs to be like a company-wide thing where the whole company is basically set up to be as open as possible and just give as much feedback as possible and just allow that to be done by everyone. And I think sometimes that's what we lose with scale, you know, with the scale of companies that we operate today. I think that's really, really difficult to foster because sometimes you just get too much of it, right? Let me close my window. Anyway, but yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting to see the shift that is happening in the industry at the moment, and kind of trying to reason through it all. But I'd be curious to hear what you all think of this. Like, if you had to distill what is happening in the industry and where you think it's going, right? So yeah, where do you think the industry is going? I think that would be like a good question to ask because I'm curious what you all think. Because yeah, I do have my thoughts. And then we also looked at like a report that came out from Matthew Ball last week, which was pretty interesting. Um, and it's been interesting for me to do like I've been listening to other reporters talking about it, and yeah, some other people having discussions about, especially with how big Roblox is. It's yeah, it's interesting. Hey, Alan, welcome, welcome. Let's have a look. Oh, did the notification go out? Oh, that's awesome. Hey, there we go. That's good. Nice. Okay. I'll need to fix that for next week, but at least it's gone out now, so that's good. Happy to have you here, Alan. Hope you're doing well. Yop is saying more PvP, more battle pass, fling shit at a wall and see what sticks. More PvP. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Because I think it's been interesting to have a look at some of the other regions in the world and what kind of stuff that they do, right? And if you think about like some of the biggest games there, like a lot of them don't really have like a very intense PvP kind of mentality, right? Which is interesting. More battle pass. Yeah, I'd be curious. I think battle pass is sort of like it's sort of a thing that is exhausted now, right? People know what they are. There's no like new interest gimmick there. I think huh. Yeah. Be curious to see though. I mean, I think battle passes and like I don't know, these incentives are definitely gonna stay, right? They're not gonna go anywhere, I think. Um I don't know, unless they get banned by Europe or something like that, right? Because we've seen some movements there, maybe not battle passes, right? But like egregious monetization strategies. So we'll have to see. I mean, I live in Belgium, like a country that banned loot boxes. So here we are. One of the two, if I can, I think it's Belgium and the Netherlands that both like banned loot boxes. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, right? Because who are we, you know? I like CS:GO skins, like owning items outside the game feels super cool. Interesting. Okay. I still yeah, that's an interesting one. I have never attached any value to any digital because I'm very aware they can just shut that stuff down. Which is obviously for Valve, there's a massive incentive to not do that, right? But let's say, I don't know, given it enough time, a new storefront comes up that's more popular than Steam, people drop off like CS:GO. That's the sort of stuff that scares me, you know? So yeah. I can definitely see it being interesting just from like if you really are attached to a game, right? And to be fair, I have bought like gems in Guild Wars 2. I think that's probably the closest that I'm gonna get, right? I've never really done any of the CS:GO skins or any of the other kind of skins. Even if I play a new game, I basically am not dedicated enough to that game, or I don't spend enough time for it to really be meaningfully adding something to my life. But I also understand that I'm old. And this is also something where I grew up with like these old school games, like before loot boxes and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I get that it's completely different if you grow up with those things, you know? And you grow an attachment to it. Ilidank is saying, I think the golden age of AAA is coming to an end. I don't think so. I think it's actually shifting away from the Western world / America. I think America. Definitely America. I think it's AAA is shifting away from America, and you see a lot of powerhouses like rising up from China specifically, right? They're doing some really, really good stuff. And for the longest time, like China was like a market that you couldn't really have access to it, right? Even when you wanted to publish your game, you needed to then get approval and all that kind of stuff. And I think now we see the benefits of that happening when you see like all these like really interesting games coming from China and then basically setting an example for what people want, right? Because I think also you need that to a certain degree, right? Where another competitor enters a space, and I think now a lot of the a lot of the other competition, especially in America, for example, right, which was normally culturally like the powerhouse for this kind of stuff, right? Now they can see that they potentially need to go back to the roots and find like that scrappy spirit, right? Instead of doing like yearly releases and like resting on the laurels a little bit. We need that scrappy thing to return to games, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't think AAA is coming to an end. I think it's just shifting to different markets. Thanks, Game Science. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of other examples, right? I mean, not necessarily China, but I think Krafton is doing very well for themselves. They're doing some like really interesting games. I'm not too familiar with the rest of them actually, but yeah. Windless? Oh, was that God, what was the full name of that? That was like a free-to-play game that released on Steam that was like a craze for a while, right? Or are you talking about a company? Because I'm not aware. But yeah, in general, games are not going anywhere, right? It's just, yeah. Yopamin is saying, I also think gacha mechanics in single-player experiences are slowly creeping into the Western games. Might be a sour future. I don't think that's going to work, though, right? Because that's the issue with why it hasn't happened yet, actually, is that a lot of these... If you were to compare games in... if you were to compare, like, the average game and its monetization in like Asia in general, and then compare that to like a Western game. Sure, we've seen an increase in monetization when it comes to battle passes and all that kind of stuff, right? And this brings me back to, sorry, this just reminds me of my old school MMO days, right? Where if you wanted to play like a Korean MMO or something like that, and I played a lot of those, oh my god. They had... the grind in those games was ridiculous. And of course you could then pay to get to like speed it all up and all that kind of stuff, right? But they've been doing this for so long that it's like accepted in their culture and they're more open to it, right? Whereas with us, it's more like, no, we're still in the boxed copy kind of mindset, right? And it's slowly shifting over to let's say battle passes and cosmetic stuff, right? But I don't think we're ready for pay to win monetization for the majority of gamers out there. Because I think that's not gonna fly well. So I mean, here's my hopeful future. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think what we might see in the long run is hopefully more experimentation. Yeah, hopefully more experimentation. But I'm curious what shape that's going to get, right? I think I think if I were to say a trend that is gonna become more accepted is just looking at indie games, seeing what they're doing well, learning from like all the stuff that's basically on the market already and seeing what they do well, and then I don't know, having like an R&D team that like bashes together some stuff. But then it's always the funding, right? It's really hard to find funding. So I don't know. I don't know where that's gonna go. Rita is saying, I feel like the state of the industry today is like fire that heals the forest and makes it more vibrant afterwards. I think that's a very good way of putting it, because I think also we've gotten to the point, and I feel this myself, right? Why don't I play like big AAA games anymore, right? And if you really then try to look at that, it's like if I can spend my time, I'm not going to do it on something that may or may not work out, right? And especially if you then have to play a game that like either wants to rope you in, right? And is very aggressive with like, hey, join up with your friends, like just play every day and all that kind of stuff. Or I can play an indie game where I just buy it once and I can just play whenever I want and I can take my own pace. And if they release a DLC, I'll buy a DLC if it's a good game. You know, I find that, at least to me, that aligns way more with the time that I have and the experiences that I want. Because the last AAA game that I played was Assassin's Creed Shadows. And I played like an hour. And I was like, I don't know, man, what am I doing? Maybe I was not in the right mindset or something, but it was just tedious and boring, you know? Like, I don't know. It's not grabbing me. Again, maybe that's also me becoming old, you know? So take that into consideration. But I actually really like the newer Assassin's Creed games. Like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Valhalla to a certain degree. I mean, Valhalla just had the issue with just being too long, right? But I was like really impressed with Valhalla. But yeah, there was nothing... Oh, God, that sounds so horrible to say, but... I don't know, there was just nothing like really gripping about Shadows to me. I don't know. Project Windless from Krafton? I don't think I've heard about that. Project Windless, let's see. But if it still has project, then it's probably not out yet, right? Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah. The chicken. Yeah, I think that's a good example of like, you know, not taking yourself too seriously while also at the same time really being grounded in like folklore, right? And just putting like your own spin on it. And I think sometimes you need to have those swings, you know, where you as a gamer can just be like, what the fuck, that looks fucking awesome, you know, sign me up. And I think we've not had enough of those, like, for example, like that game doesn't really appeal to me, right? But I think it looks unique, it looks amazing, you know, and I think it can definitely find an audience, right? Whereas like with some of the more established franchises that we're used to now, I think that's what it feels like, right? We're used to them, and it's like, what do I do with this? I don't know. Eugenics just had a great launch. Instant Classics. Yeah, I think Eugenics. I mean, yeah, it's I think it looks like an awesome game from what I saw, right? And I've liked his work from before, right? Like The Binding of Isaac and all that kind of stuff. I really like his games. That's kind of what I grew up with, not grew up with, but like into uni, I was playing The Binding of Isaac like a lot, you know. But it's always something to be careful of. That, I mean, we're talking about a dev perspective now, right? Where that is not something sustainable unless, I don't know, unless you've already done it before, or you have some sort of backup plan or something like that, right? Or someone helping you out. So yeah. But it does look great though. I do like the look of it. Hello, Mohammed. Hello, Arvid. Good to see you both. We're just chatting about like the future of the industry, but that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, whenever we talk about this, I feel like we get into like this really negative spiral. I do have to say, I am really hopeful. I don't think that I have been this excited to like potentially build my own thing at a certain point, you know? Just because some people were saying it in the chat as well that there's like a lot of really great indie games that are coming out. I was playing a game called Deep Dish Dungeon yesterday, and it has like a demo out, right? So I mean, it's not finalized at all, but it was just like a fun little time. Sure, it has some bugs, it has some issues with it, and all that kind of stuff. But it was like a good little time. I like the art style of it, like, and I think I don't know, like it really feels like someone said in the chat that it feels like indies seem to be doing okay. It's so easy to be negative nowadays. I usually am skeptical of stuff that is like X is bad and is going to continue to get bad forever. Yeah. You should never. And I try to do my best, even though like I don't know. I feel like I sound like a negative Nancy most of the time. But no, I am genuinely excited. I think there's more opportunity than ever. I've also said this about like artistry, right? Sure, everyone. There's a lot of anxiety and fear of missing out, and you know, like a lot of panic when it comes to like AI and like all that kind of stuff. What it's gonna do. But if you strip that little sliver away, you know, because we don't know where that's going to go in the future. Sure, there's some stuff happening now, but let's look at it at the long term. I think there's more opportunities than ever to like do some really cool creative stuff that you want to do on the internet, right? And you can actually make like a good living off of it if you wanted to. Sure, again, like it's going to take a lot of time. Not everyone's going to make it, as in like not everyone can get, I don't know, like YouTube monetized and all that kind of stuff, right? But there's more opportunity than ever. If you think about it before, like before YouTube, before Patreon, all that kind of stuff, I mean, yeah, and even for us, right? Like 3D environment artist, like the opportunities that we get by like making something that's actually relevant for a production in a game or in a movie or architectural visualization, that stuff is fucking awesome, you know? And we can just craft that out of nothing. We just think about something, we craft it out of nothing, and then we can hand it over to someone else who can make something really cool with it, you know? It's freaking awesome. Or we do something ourselves with it. So yeah. And I think that's also important for the future, you know? I think the way, so for example, my approach to AI is I will try some of the stuff that comes out from time to time, right? Because I think you should. And then you can accurately see what it can and can't do. Because I think what's happening is that there's a lot of conversations online, of course, but I don't think they're informed by actually having tried the tools themselves. Because I still feel, I mean, it's been a while since I tried it, but like every time I try it, like I'm really disappointed with what the hell comes out, you know? Especially when it comes to 3D stuff. It's just not good. Abstract Duck is, well, talking about AI. We're not going to be talking about AI because that's like, yeah, still a sore topic. Seen some concerning demos where in a game you just type a prompt to generate cosmetics with AI. Like, will a game shift from concrete exact narrative to fluid, endlessly customizable loose scripts? Well, so here's the thing with AI, right? Like, if we talk about that, if you look at actual games where, for example, there's endless NPC conversations and you can chat with any NPC, what is the actual purpose of going into a game where you can just chat to something like ChatGPT anyway, right? To me, the purpose of a game is that you get to enjoy a universe or a world that is created by people that are really good at crafting that world, and they spent their fucking blood, sweat, and tears on crafting this curated world for you, and then you can step in it and experience their vision, right? Because I don't fucking care if you say like, hey, look, every NPC here is like AI driven and blah 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 blah, I don't give a fuck, man. Like I'll just be honest about that. I want to get a nicely polished, well-rounded vision of a group of devs who are really passionate about bringing their vision forward, right? That's what I want to experience. Because otherwise I can just sign up to ChatGPT and talk to them. And then when it comes to the cosmetics, right? There's I mean, where you generate cosmetics with AI, and then you're saying, will games shift from the concrete exact narrative to fluid, endlessly customizable loot scripts? Well, the second part we already discussed, right? But to generate cosmetics with AI, that is going to be very interesting, because that has a lot of legal loopholes that a lot of companies are not going to be happy with. As we've already been seeing, by the way. Like, companies seem to be more willing to crack down because now AI is becoming this more established thing. We can sort of get a better grasp of what it is and isn't, right? So a lot of companies are now actually starting to sue and build cases against those companies. So keep that in mind. That is also the big reason why games have not used it for the most part up until now, because it is just too flimsy. It's just too scary. I think, sure, sometimes you will see like a game prototype where they go all in, right? Because they want to sell you the AI dream. But I don't think there's an actual game behind it. You know? You just want to... How should I say this? There's... With a market like this, and I mean market in like a very broad sense, right? When a new hype cycle happens, we've seen this with NFTs, we've seen this with currently AI, we've seen it with the metaverse, we've seen that with crypto, maybe not crypto, but you get my drift, right? There's a bunch of people that go into the space that don't give a fuck about like what the space is about. They just want to make money. So whenever you see those kind of things popping up on your social media, that's what they want to do. They want to showcase that they can make a lot of money, right? Or they can make a lot of money through like what you do. That's all they want to do. They don't actually care about making a game, right? They don't care about the act of constructing, like, again, like a game that has like good design and is then built from the ground up to be that design, and then maybe they'll add some stuff on top of it, right? Think about this, and this is probably my last example, but we don't even have to go to AI, right? If you think about loot boxes and the battle pass and all that kind of stuff. In the beginning, there was a big discussion that people were saying very vocally that if you want to monetize it in this way, then you'll have to change the design for the game to be more appropriate to sell more of those loot boxes, right? And I think they're 100% right. And I think the same happens here as well, right? Like if you want to, I don't know, sell your stuff through doing something with AI, of course you're going to design your game more towards funneling you towards a thing that makes money, right? Which means that you're basically taken away from the game. So yeah. It's like when you see the video on Instagram about the new GD thing from Google saying gaming industry is cooked, who clearly aren't devs and they don't understand the tech. Oh yeah. And I think, yeah, that's the thing, right? It's just social perception. And I think this is the thing that I really want to talk to you all about, right? And I think this is really important. If you ever feel like there's a lot of fear and they're trying to target you specifically, or you're feeling like you're missing out, just remember that that's all perception. You need to look at the actual data. You need to look at, for example, is the games industry still growing? Are they still pushing out like really cool games? Sure. Okay, there's still going to be a job for you then, isn't there? Because all this stuff, all this surface level stuff of just like a bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about, that are just, I don't know, trying to make as much money off of like AdSense by like, I don't know, posting the most viral stuff. That's not gonna, you shouldn't be taken away by that, right? So just focus on the thing that you you're already doing. Focus on the passion that you have. Double down on that. And I think that's always going to work out. Sure, will you have to change and like pivot? Not pivot, but like, will you have to adapt a little bit along the line? Sure. But like, this industry is not going to go boonk to zero, like all of a sudden. That's not going to happen. I can guarantee you. But it is crazy that the stuff goes out. Rustam is saying Google Walking Simulator is great. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So if you look at coherency, right? Because that's basically why you can only generate up until like 60 seconds or something like that, right? That's because like the consistency of the world literally starts to make no sense after that point, right? So, I mean, have fun playing the game for 60 seconds, I guess. Well, it is weird. But yeah. I think my top advice would be, like Harry is saying, maybe spend a little bit less time on social media, you know? It's so negative with bait headlines and just using buzzwords. So it makes me feel unmotivated. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people are into, right? I'll give you... I was thinking about this when I was on my walk yesterday or something like that. And I was conscious about my transition from being more of a consumer to a producer. And I was thinking about like how that happened, because I remember back in the day, like I was spending a lot of my time on games, on social media, all that kind of stuff, right? And there was a large part of it that in the end either made me feel guilty because I was spending, I don't know, 10 hours a day on Guild Wars 2 when I still had school the next day and I didn't finish my homework, that kind of stuff, right? And I think at a certain point, it was just like, okay, if I really want to make a change, like I need to be less of a consumer and more of a producer. And then over time, slowly but surely, I think that's how you get out of that trap, right? Because a lot of this stuff is reflexes, right? I talk to a lot of our community members that still say to me that they use like ArtStation on a day-to-day basis. But ArtStation is just a portfolio website. That's all it is. It's not social media. You shouldn't even treat it as that, right? You should only go on ArtStation when you want to look at some, I don't know, some cool art, you know? Or just use it whenever you want to do it. Well, whenever you have a goal to do it, right? But if you have this intention of like, hey, I don't know what to do, okay, I'm gonna go on ArtStation. You gotta be somewhat conscious of that when that happens, right? Because the same ticks you'll have with TikTok and YouTube Shorts and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I'm just rambling about social media now. But I think honestly that's like really important. You know, maybe my incoherent sentences didn't make a lot of sense, but I think it's very important to be conscious about the amount of time that you spend on anything else than just creating, right? Especially if you are an artist. And I mean that in a way where I can definitely tell if I'm not creating anything. I can definitely feel it, you know? I can feel it. I become conscious that I'm not creating anything. So yeah. Gotta keep ourselves sane. Because we don't want to feel unmotivated all the time. Ozymandius, welcome to the community. Lovely to have you. I don't know why that didn't show up on the screen, by the way, but welcome. But yeah, I've said this a ton of times, right? It's your... Oh, there we go. There's a message. To me, art was as important to my career as it is important to me, right? It is... Yeah, I think that's a big eye-opening thing. And it's just like over time, like you learn so much about yourself and who you are and what you want to become through the act of pursuing your art, that that is almost, you know, when people say like it's not the destination but the journey that matters. I think over time you get to recognize that. It's real eye opening once you're self aware. I have my "what the fuck am I doing" moment. Oh yeah, and I'll have those moments like I'll have those really, I'll say it vocally to myself. Sometimes I'll say like, Jesus Christ, I need to grow up. And I mean that in a way of like, sometimes I'll do this stupid stuff where I like, okay, I'll give you a stupid example. Talking to an accountant, you know? And I'm just like, nah, I'll just do that later. And that later turned into like a couple of years, you know? And sometimes it really comes down to just being like, God, dude, I need to grow up, you know? I need to just do this. It's not that big of a deal. But I have those the conscious moment, like at least, God, I will say, yeah, at least every year at least. But I had those way more frequent when I was a student. And it's something that you work towards that, right? You improve yourself every day to get better at it. And it takes time. It takes time. Quentin is saying me in a nutshell. Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay, right? I think the big thing is realizing that you might be in that position and then being like, okay, what are we gonna do about it? You know? Because I can tell you there's moments in my life where I felt so overwhelmed because I delayed so many things, and it got instantly better once I just was like, okay, next weekend I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna put it all on the checklist, and I'm gonna work through it. Instantly felt way better about that choice. You know, because that action is just like, oh, I can do this, you know? Because most of the stuff is just like small stuff, right? I'm so lucky I have a lawyer flatmate. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You gotta make the most of it. Last year I decided to pick up creative writing in uni to get my foot in the door. Semestral project I tried utilizing AI engines to craft scenarios. Yeah, consistency is lacking a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also another big thing, right? Especially not actually during the portfolio reviews. I feel like maybe that's also because we have a smaller sample size now. The portfolio reviews that we've been doing on a weekly basis, I see more of a focus now, which is good. But there are still sometimes like people that come in and they just have like everything on their portfolio, and it's like, okay, we can't really hire you for anything, right? It's really hard to make a decision that way. But yeah, that's also okay, right? That's also okay in terms of again, recognizing where you are, recognizing where you want to be, and then putting in the work to get there, right? Can you show us the helmet behind you? Yeah, that's a Fallout helmet. That's from like Fallout 76, the collector's edition. It's cool. Rita is saying, I'd really like your new portfolio points update. Oh, thank you, Rita. I was wondering if anyone had read through them. I feel like they're more actionable. Because I think before they were a little bit too vague. So I was like, I need to make this more actionable, and we're actually going to be talking more about them during the portfolio reviews. I am also... Yeah, I started to write like a post-it note with like a bunch of like portfolio tips on it, so that we can maybe make a video, add that on the main page, so that we get like a quick snippet of the most common tips already out there. I need to do the portfolio review, but I'm scared. Nah, you shouldn't be. I mean, I know I can be like pretty direct, right? But if you want, in the sign up, you can say, I don't know how you'd even say this. You can say like, hey, please put on your silk gloves, you know? Treat me kindly. Something like that. But I think sometimes, I mean, the main difference is going to be, and I hope that I've never really offended anyone with it, right? But I will say that I've gotten like a lot of really positive responses from people in my DMs about this stuff, right? So I think, God, here's another thing that I think about when I think about this stuff, right? I don't want to put you in a position where we then have to do a portfolio review again in 6 months, and then I'll have to tell you a couple more things, and then a couple more things, and then a couple more things, right? Because that is just like expanding your timeline and ballooning your timeline so much that it doesn't make sense, right? And I think a lot of unis are pretty good at this stuff, you know? Where it's like, oh yeah, come do this course for 4 years, or like 3 to 4 years. And it's like, cool, still can't get a job though, you know? So I think that's also where I started taking this stuff more seriously. Again, I needed to grow up and just be like a bit more upfront. But yeah. Oh, McFal, you were asking if I tried any games from the Steam Next Fest. Nope. No. So I was talking about the last game that I tried before, which was like Deep Dish Dungeon, which is pretty fun. We could play it on Friday, actually. Even though I think I've completed the demo, right? It's pretty short. But yeah. I think we could try some stuff. I think it could be fun. If anyone has any recommendations of what to check out on Steam Next Fest, feel free to send me a DM or share it in the games channel on the community. That would be awesome. But yeah, realistically, a recruiter looking at it is being way more harsh and brutal, so it makes sense to be black and white for good feedback. Yeah. I mean, that's usually what I say during portfolio reviews as well, right? It's like a recruiter is literally just going to be like a couple of seconds where I spend like 30 to 45 minutes talking about your portfolio. That is such a generous amount of time that no one is ever going to spend for the rest of your career. Right? Unless someone else gives you like really in-depth feedback about it, right? But a recruiter's not going to do it. Like someone else from the company is not going to do it. Yeah. Rita, thank you for the question. Oh yeah, this is also a good reminder. But yeah, feel free to ask any question in the chat. Anything about like game dev, environment art, your own work. Feel free to ask anything you want. Abe Solanki, can you please reply? I don't know what I need to reply to. Did I miss your question? I don't think I'm seeing you in here. Nope. Let's see. So Rita is saying, or like asking, what do you think about participation in the Rookies Award? Is it worth the effort? Yeah, I think, and this is the way that I approached my student years, right? Anything you see out there, anything, do it. Especially when it's as easy. Well, I don't know what the Rookies Awards entails now. But I think it's always worth participating, honestly. In anything. I did the Rookies when I was a student. There were a bunch of other things. I just participated in everything. Literally everything, especially when it's just like, oh, you sign up, you share your work. If that is it, especially do that then. If it demands like a bit more time from you, let's say for example team challenges, right? Like we're gonna host the team challenges in a couple of weeks again. Really excited for those, but those do take up 5 weeks, right? So then it becomes more of a thing where you have to think about like, okay, am I gonna have the time? Is it gonna, it becomes more of a bigger thing where something like the Rookies feels like it's really easy to do. So, yeah. I would definitely try to do that in anything. I don't think going easy on someone helps them in the long run. Be nice about it. Being honest is always best. Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's where sometimes I was feeling that I was being, God, I don't want to say too nice. I was being too kind, I guess. Like I was trying to wrap everything up in a lot of context and all that kind of stuff, where sometimes it just makes sense to say like, hey, look, this is just not going to work, you know? Plus it's also way quicker as well. Abe is based in India. I'm an environment artist. I lost my job in November. I haven't found any, and I'm feeling really depressed. How are we going to get through this, man? Yeah, that sucks. For example, well, first of all, sorry to hear about that. But yeah, it is everyone's personal situation, right? So I can't really help out there. I've always just seen it as like, yeah, that's what games does to you, man. I would say get back on the grind, you know, get back on refreshing that portfolio. Hopefully you've made some work that you can show off. And then see if you can get like another job, right? I think you might honestly be in one of the better regions to still find a job. Weirdly enough, in the entire game sphere, you might still be in a better position than most of us are. Interestingly enough. But yeah, it's sometimes life is gonna beat you down, you know, and it's up to you to decide what to do with that. I know it's all easier said than done, but sometimes that is just what it is, right? And I would say for the future, this is what I did like very consciously over my career, right? I would spend a lot of my personal time, if I had it, trying to develop my business skills or getting my skills to be more marketable, right? So for me, that was building up Beyond Extent, right? Before Beyond Extent, I was like selling asset packages and doing sellable resources and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think that could also be a good way to build yourself as a more sustainable future, rather than always being dependent on someone else, right? That's at least my opinion. I'm a person who really values independence a lot. So that's going to differ from a lot of people, right? But I've always had that. So yeah, that would be my suggestion, to look into a more sustainable way of getting reliable revenue for yourself. Ever had the option to get paid in shares or revenue? Is it a wise choice, short or long term? God, I have. So first of all, I've never been paid in revenue share or something like that, right? Most bigger companies, they do share schemes, right? So you get your normal income, and then on top of it, you can decide if you want to then invest a portion of that into the company, back into the company, basically, right? Usually what they do is they give you, for example, like through Microsoft, right? When I was still working as like a full-time employee for Playgrounds, they give you the option to buy Microsoft stock at like 10% discount, right? That's like a company incentive to like get you to buy like Microsoft stock. Same happened at Ubisoft, right? For example, with Ubisoft, I have like a bunch of stock with them. The good thing there is that the way that they did it is that they guarantee you that the price can never go lower than you bought it at, right? So sure, the stock went down drastically, but I didn't lose any money, which is also good. But you can see, right? I've also not made any money with Ubisoft. So that is a risk you have to take, right? I think personally, if you only get paid in shares or revenue, you need to be 100% sure that the person who's running the company has all the capabilities to release a game onto the market, that the team is suitable for the type of project and capable for that type of project, and that you can also live multiple years without potential income. Because that is what it's going to take, right? A lot of people are just not in that position. And also make sure you get a contract, right? Because a person can say, oh yeah, we'll pay you in revenue share, and then not get you a contract. That's also a red flag. So I think, in my personal opinion, if you want to share like a share or revenue split, if you wanna get that done for your compensation, you need to get that covered by a lawyer and make sure that you're 100% set on that is the thing that you want to do. Because that is super risky. But also, could it be worth it? Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give you a stupid example, right? This is not going to be feasible at all. But let's say you sign up to work on like the next Expedition 33, and the way that they do it is that you get a percentage of revenue. You're set, you know? But that is the 1% of the 1% out there, right? That's a unicorn. So yeah, in general, advisable? Probably not. I think it feels too much like a bet rather than a guarantee to me. Hey Liz, that sounds interesting. Is it hard to sell assets? No, actually, it's really easy. Like, do you have to be approved by the website to do so? I actually don't know how that works anymore, because I've been set up. So I've been set up with Unreal Engine Marketplace, which is now Fab, for such a long time that I don't even remember what the sign up process is. If I remember correctly, it is super easy. You just have to fill in some paperwork. Most of that done is for you. Like, the way that they have their sign up on their website is super simple to do. And then I think it takes like a couple of days for you to get approved, but that's it. And then you can basically start making money. There is a rigorous like validation process. So whenever you submit something, the company will actually send you a checklist of like, hey, look, this is all the stuff that we check. This is where you failed. We need to adjust all of this stuff, right? And that checklist is, I think, well, the last time I tried it was like one page with like small checkboxes. And I think they go through like, I don't know, 80 validation steps or something like that. It's crazy. It's crazy in depth. But that's basically the only thing, right? But if you apply good practices to your work already when you're making it, then I think you should be in a good position already to do so. I would highly advise you to do whatever you're doing right now and to think about potentially just putting it online for, I don't know. Well, in this case, well, not in your case specifically, Liz, because you're doing a concept from someone else, right? So that becomes trickier. But if you're doing something unique, or you base something on like real life, let's say, the first thing that I sold, for example, was like an industrial asset pack, right? And that was just based on like my experience with working in industrial plants and all that kind of stuff. And I turned that into like a modular kit, and I sold that. And I think, oh god, this data is so outdated. But I've made a decent amount of money of it, especially over the years, right? God, do I still have it? Yeah, let's see. Okay, take this with a grain of salt. This is really outdated. The market is completely changed. All that kind of stuff. A lot of caveats, right? But this is the total income of like my years from 2018 to 2022 from those two asset packs. So what I basically did is so here's the total if you want to see. Let me actually, so that's like the total, right? For my first thing that I knew how to build a modular kit, right? So I had that experience, but then for a thing that I just threw online without like any marketing afterwards, it has done like pretty decently over time. So I don't want to guarantee it, but I think there is a decent a decent chance that if you really invest your time and your effort into something like this, that it could pay off in the long run. I am also going to say that this is where it actually becomes interesting if you think about the future of Unreal Engine, right? Who knows where like the grand vision is going to go, but you can see what they're trying to do with Fab, right? Like having it more integrated within the engine. So the marketplace and the engine are going to get closer and closer together. What that means for you is that more and more people are going to have access to the assets that you build for Fab, right? So that becomes really interesting for you to work towards in the future, right? That would be my opinion. If you want to make assets, right? Because I didn't care about making assets. I want to be clear. Like, I did this as a test. I think it was a pretty good test. And then afterwards, I was like, yeah, I don't want to be doing assets my entire time anyway. I want to make environments, you know? Yeah. So yeah, it is something to keep in mind that basically comes down to what I said before, right? There are opportunities out there. And sometimes, and again, the data that I just showed you is really outdated, but it can be really helpful to try things for yourself, right? Because it may or may not work out depending on what you want to do. But it's worth experimenting with this stuff. It 100% is. Jai Shield is asking, I noticed Decagon keeps throwing asset packs, prop packs, environment packs. Oh, like, yeah, they're creating new packs all the time, right? Is that guy at the top trying to capture the marketplace monopoly, I wonder? Well, they make good stuff, right? If you see a gap in the market, it would be stupid not to throw your expertise against it. But also, Decagon not only makes those asset packages, they also do a lot of co-dev and outsourcing for other companies too now. And they've been working really hard at it for a long time, you know? So, and there's other companies who came up. What is it? Machine Gun, and then you got Stylized Arts, and all those companies were basically following the same sort of trajectory, even with different ways and different sensibilities around them. But they were basically competing for the same thing, right? So whenever you see someone who's like trying to monopolize it in a market like this, I think there's a lot of competition there as well. I lost a lot of things during this time. My save has gone. Oh, dude, you need to back up your save. Can't be losing them saves. If you we'll go back to the business, right? If you think about the amount of time you invest into your work, and let's do an hourly rate, right? I don't know. Let's pick a random hourly rate of, like, let's say 50 euros, right? Let's think about the amount of time that you spend on a personal project, right? With losing that save, you've lost yourself like a shit ton of money, you know? And that usually makes it more real. So make sure that you back up your stuff. That's important. Similar competitors on Machine Gun, Leartis Studios. Yep. Yeah. There's a decent amount of competition there. There's a decent amount of competition there. But yeah, Decagon was definitely first, right? And I do still think that Decagon has a higher quality bar than most of the other ones. And I think that is what sets them apart, right? Because I don't know if it has changed recently, but I've definitely seen packs from the Artist Studio that, well, first of all, I know where they come from, right? And I don't think they look that good. If you want to build a business on top of that, right? I mean, they're doing really good for themselves. Don't get me wrong, you know. They were pretty inventive of capturing their own side of the market. But yeah, don't go competing with them, right? Just what I'm saying is just be like this independent artist that releases some really good stuff over time, and that's what you want to do, right? I'll give you one example, and then we will jump into some feedback, because I realize that I'm rambling a lot again. But Alexander Sikov, let me put him on screen. I think this might be one of my favorite examples when it comes to what to do with your environments, and when it comes to like selling your packages as well, right? Because all the stuff that he's done here, this, this, all of this, that is all just like work for the marketplace. So what he does is he combines really cool work for his portfolio and then really sells it well, because that's what we do, right? We're environment artists. We know how to visually sell an image well. And then he sells that on the marketplace as well. And he does some really cool work. You can see that it's all about the quality, right? And it looks really, really cool. And it has the player, or like not the player, but like the developer behind it in mind, right? It is meant for you to be like, hey, look, if I want some caves, this looks like a really good pack that I can just make something with, you know? Because it has all the pieces that you kind of want from an asset pack, right? If you look at all the stuff here, if you have to make that yourself, that is going to be pretty expensive. Whereas as a studio, you can just buy this and you can just start dressing the level, right? You can spend more time on the stuff that actually matters to your game. Right. I'll share this. I'll share his profile. Give him a shout out. But yeah, let's switch on over to some feedback, shall we? You know the drill. Raise those hands, and then we'll go one by one. Cyrus first, Eden second, Liz, and then Liddy. Thank y'all. For people that are new, yeah, this is basically the beginning of the work in progress feedback. So if you want to get seen first, feel free to raise your hand if you're in the chat, and then we'll do it. We'll do it in that order. Cool. Let's see. Syed first. I think again. For you to correct me, I think this is you, right, Syed? I'm afraid I'll just watch. That's okay. That's okay. Cool. Let's see. Let's dive in. Where's my pen? Let me get Discord as well for some additional context that I will need. Right, and we are going to try and be somewhat succinct with this, right? And kind of keep up a good pace. So let's dive in. Where's your thingy? There we go. Okay, quick update. I changed the watercolor. I think it fits the mood better now. Cool. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what to improve. So question number 1. The floor probably won't be modular and will be a single big asset. How would you approach keeping a good textile density on a large asset like this? So for something like this is usually where we just go for tidables, right? So if we see a surface like this, you don't want to wrap it uniquely. That is not going to make sense. You're not going to hit your textile density target. What you want to do with something like this is you want to use a tidable texture, and then you just tide it as much as you need for your textile density. What that usually means is if you have like a textile density checker or a textile density tool, is you literally just select all your UVs, you set your desired textile density, you click a button, and you're done. Super easy. Super easy to do stuff with like tidable textures, because remind yourself, with a tidable texture, you are not restricted to the 0 to 1 space in your UV, right? You can go outside of it. That's all good. And then what I would do on top of it then is we can then just add vertex paint or decals to it, right? I think a combination of the two is always effective, but you can get away with either or if you wanted to. Your next question is for a pose for the statue. Is the idle pose fine, or would you want to have them looking towards the gate to frame the scene better? I would say, and this is probably my favorite thing to point out every time, story. Story, story, story. What is the story? Why are those statues there? Who are they for? What is this temple about? You know? That's what I want to know. Because then, if it's, for example, if it's a shrine to nature, an idle pose could be cool. Right? But if you want to have a, I don't know, this is a combat shrine, right? And this is a shrine devoted to, I don't know, the deity of war or something like that, right? Then you want something more aggressive, right? You want something that evokes like strength and power, and it's probably going to have a dynamic pose, right? So that's why it comes from the story. Because what do you want the statues to say about the story that you want to convey in the scene, right? So think about what kind of temple it is and how you can then build your statues in a way that they are in sync with what you want to say about your environment, right? So that is what you always need to come back to. If you ever feel lost, think about what the story is. The story is always your anchor for this kind of stuff. I also made 3 rock variants for the stairs, but I don't fully finish them yet. Just want to make sure that I'm doing it in the right way before polishing. Yeah. I mean, yeah, from what I can tell, that looks good. If you are unsure about certain things or how to approach a certain workflow, you can already just do the minimal amount of effort, right? Like just sculpt really quickly, bake it down, or, well, you don't even have to bake it down. You can just do a really quick sculpt, decimate it, and rebuild your staircase with that, right? So that you can see if it's actually going to work. Because once you see things in action, that's usually where you can make a better decision or way to go into the future, right? So on something like this, I would just get the stones that you've already done, I don't know, and recreate the staircase, right? And to see how that looks. Yeah, cool stuff. Be careful with the intensity of the colors here, right? If you wanna do something like this, try to have it a little bit more subtle. I think also sticking to your original concept for your lighting could be a good choice, right? Because that gives you a good indication, especially if you're pretty new with how to light up an environment. Use references, use the concept, and all that kind of stuff, because it's gonna keep you grounded. Or try to find relevant images for this, right? Yeah, I think something like this looks more grounded than something that's really overblown, like really over the top. Cool. Thank you. A good little update there. Love to see it. Then we're going on to the next person, which is Eden. Eden is right over here. I've done like a bunch of scribbles already. Let me make them a little bit more readable. We're gonna do outer shadow. No, not an inner shadow. Right. Okay. Let's have a look. So where are you in the list? Cool. Just started my final major project for uni. My work is inspired by Ripper Dogs in Cyberpunk. However, my clinic is situated in brutalistic sci-fi apartments set in the near future. Okay. Interesting. That is unknown to the government and only known locally or through word of mouth. Yeah. I think that's what most of the Ripper Dogs, or like especially the hackers in Cyberpunk, were supposed to be, right? Especially the early concept art was really cool because they were like always in like dark, dingy basements or locations, so that they were really hard to track down. But yeah, I wanted to ask, does the scene and the composition read well? Is there anything that you would add or take away at this stage? if we remove some of this stuff, we have 4 separate compositions, right? So I would say that this one probably reads the best to me at this point. Also because we don't really have to think about like things that we haven't solved for yet, right? So for example, here you have the open door. We need to make that interesting somehow, and that's probably going to require like a lot more work. Or, I don't know, some additional work that is not relevant to the scene. So something like this could make the scene way more condensed and save you like a bunch of time when it comes to executing on that scene. The only reason why I picked this one over this, and I think a combination of the two could actually be good, is because this one is kind of cut off at like a weird point here. So I don't really like the way that it cuts off like the second computer monitor, right? Where you kind of want to show that off. So if you think about something like this, for example, where, again, we are going to use one of my favorite rules, especially for the beginning in composition, is you just split your screen into 3 separate sections. And then, I don't know, let's do it roughly like this, right? And then we can see that like these are your PowerPoints. Like these are your points of power, right? Where you want to add interesting things in your scene. So I think the computer is in a good spot, right? That's sort of gravitating towards this line, which is good. This is a little bit out of line, and we're seeing like a bunch of like boring, just empty wall stuff here, which is not really going to be that relevant to the scene, right? So I would already say that we're also dealing with some dead space here. Either we fill this up with assets, or we just condense the scene down. And then maybe rotate the camera a little bit as well. But we condense the scene down to maybe something more like this. So that we focus a bit more on the things that are important, and we remove some of like the empty space in the scene. Sure, this is gonna keep this is, by the way, a good tip if you're doing this in Unreal. Enable your cinematic viewport, and that has a built-in rule of thirds like grid that you can use in your scene. So use that to your advantage, because that is gonna really help your scene and your compositions. But then we will probably have to reorient the camera and make sure that the composition is kind of fixed again to work with the rule of thirds, right? But yeah, that's what I would do. So doing a composition like this is probably going to work. I'll just lower this down a little bit. I've been trying to look for that. Yeah, you have to enable your cinematic viewport first before you can find it. Because I don't know if they changed this, but like you start out with your default viewport first, so you need to change to cinematic, and then it gives you like a bunch of viewport overlays. Unless they changed it. But yeah. Let's see. So the second question is, would you recommend making titleables? How would you recommend making titleables really pop and stand out? I was thinking about importing them as world-aligned textures. That feels weird because that is pretty expensive in terms of like rendering cost, and is basically going to do the same thing as just unwrapping them on the wall, right? But would I be able to get away with things like bumps and rips in the wall with decals? Okay, so let's break this down. You don't need world-aligned textures. You don't need that at all. What I would do is just treat there's 2 approaches, right? Either you treat this wall as like a large single mesh, and then you just unwrap it as you normally would, and you slap your titleable on it, right? Or you break it up into modular pieces, and then you try to make it like seamless, right? For a room like this, where modularity is not going to matter too much, you can literally just make the shell of the building, and then you just add your titleable onto like all the wall surfaces, and then you're done, right? However, that doesn't look cool, right? So how do we fix that then? Because here's the thing with titleables. You want your titleables to stand out, but actually the goal of a titleable texture is not to stand out. Because a titleable to me is always about the base, and then we add additional stuff on top of it, right? So, for example, in this case, if you want like rips or you want to have dirt and all that kind of good stuff coming on your titleable, you do that either through having multiple titleables where you blend between them with vertex painting, or you add decals on top of it, right? So if you want to have very specific data, let's say, for example, like drip, or I don't know, like a very specific rip, right? Like a singular specific rip, that is a decal. If you want to have more flexibility, and let's say this is the wallpaper is going to be ripped in multiple places, then we need to look into like a more flexible solution with vertex paint, for example. But yeah, I would say a base titleable, that's just what it is. It just needs to function for laying out the groundwork, and then we add vertex coloring or decals on top of it. You were specifically talking about bumps, right? Where you have like the warping of the wallpaper, for example. If it is subtle warping, we can do that in the normals, right? We can do that in a normal texture. If it becomes like heavy bumps or heavy rips, or maybe like the wallpaper is peeling off in like big snippets, right? Then we need to be smart and we need to make some additional geometry for that, right? For example, if you have, if let's say this is your wallpaper, right? And you have like, I don't know, let's say this is what you want to do. That's for your normal. However, if you want to have something like this, and then, I don't know, it peels off here, right? This needs geometry. Of course. So yeah. Cool. And then the last thing is, in terms of texturing, the assets, how would you approach this? My tutor recommended I put everything on a trim sheet and then use decals and floaters. I was thinking of grouping assets with their own individual texture sheets, then baking and texturing them, as I'm familiar with that. What would you suggest? So that's a good point, right? Like, you're familiar with that more traditional workflow. If you're doing sci-fi, usually what you want to do for sci-fi stuff in general is you wanna use a workflow that is traditionally it's called mid-poly, right? They use this in Alien Isolation, they use this in Star Citizen, where basically the base surface is just going to be a titleable. You bevel all the edges, and then any additional detail you add on top of it is done with decals, right? And that can be a trim sheet and has like all the little details that you want on top of it. But that is technically a little bit more complex to set up. So I would say that is probably the way that you want to go about it. But if you're easily scared of like technical stuff, you probably don't want to do that, right? I would ask your tutor, honestly, for some more advice on this. My advice would be the mid-poly workflow, but I think that requires a little bit more insights in your skills. And yeah, but that's what I would do. Hope that was helpful, Eden. And thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. Oh, wait, before we move on, if it's like generic sci-fi stuff, right? I do want to make a point of this. So let's say most of this stuff can be mid-poly. Oh, actually, this guy as well. Potentially these guys too. But let's say for the ease of use, this is just like your normal high poly to low poly workflow. And then this one is also like high to low poly, probably. That's more what I'm thinking. Cool. Thank you, Eden. Thank you for sharing. And then we're going to go to Liz. No notes for Liz yet. But I remember the question. I think it was something about the coffee machine, right? So right now, I feel like the espresso machine is huge, but it matches the size and the concept. Do you think I should make it shorter? Thank you so much. So here's the thing, right? In the industry, in a professional working environment, if a concept artist focuses on 2D, right? Oftentimes they build like a 3D block art and all that kind of stuff, but their main focus is getting the idea across in 2D shape, right? What you do, what your role is in the pipeline, is that you make it where it's realistic and people can actually immerse themselves into the playable environment, right? So for that, sure, if something looks decent in the concept, but then doesn't work in 3D, it's our job to actually adjust it. Now, sometimes there's a case where you can talk to the concept artist and be like, hey, look, was this intentional? Because it looks like really out of whack in terms of scale with the rest of it, right? But in this case, if we are going to go for realistic proportions, then that is 100% what you need to do. So I would actually look at all the proportions here and look at what is realistic in terms of all the sizes, right? I mean, you've been doing that. You've changed like some of the proportions already, but when it comes to that, I would take the essence of the concept and then spin it into a realistic interpretation, which means that you have to do more work on the proportions, right? So long story short, yes, change the proportions. Because what's another way of saying this? If this is like a live game, right? So you're working on a game that's actually going to be releasing soon, and someone runs across that coffee machine, and let's say for ease of argumentation, that coffee machine is twice the size, but everything else in the environment is the normal size, that is going to look off, and people are going to see that as like, oh, that doesn't look right. Okay, I don't like that, you know? So that's something to keep in mind. It's basically the same thing as textile density, right? Like your proportions are to ensure that there's consistency within the proportions and the shape and the scale of things. Whereas your textile density is basically trying to do the same thing, but for your textures, right? So yeah, change proportions to match real life. But yeah, I think the changes are coming along nicely. I do like what I see. I would keep going back and forth and making sure that like everything in the scene is like 100% correct, right? We did this like really ridiculous exercise last week where I stood up and actually measured with my own body like where like the armrests of like chairs are going to be and all that kind of stuff, right? I would literally, in the beginning, I would do that with like everything in the scene. Like grab a bowl. How big is a bowl? You know? How big is the coffee machine? Sometimes this is going to sound even sillier. Just go to a local shop, you know? Go to a local like coffee roaster and just see like, okay, how big are they? You know? And then see how big it compares to like the cashier. Just go and explore and find those things in real life. Because that can always give you like a better understanding of what it looks like. Cool. Quick one, Liz. Good stuff. Cool updates. Keep it up. By the way, Tim, here, there is a local magazine in my area here in Canada that I could have my work be in it. Do you think it's worth it? The magazine is called Wonderlit. It does get it distributed over Ontario. Yeah. Who knows? You know? It kind of depends on who's going to read that, but you never know, right? If it costs you like a lot of money, probably not. But if it's free, might as well try it, you know? I would say always, this is the same approach I had with all my, I don't know, my business stuff, right? Like trying to sell online resources and all that kind of stuff. It's just, you got to try stuff. Like try it and then maybe talk to the company and say, ask them some numbers, right? Like maybe some numbers, like how many do get distributed? I mean, there's going to be no drawback, right? Like what could be the drawback of it? I can't really imagine that there's going to be a drawback there. So I would just give it a try. Cool. Thank you, saying Liz. No worries, Liz. Let's go to Lily next. Right. Okay, Lily, I do have to say this one. It's kind of... It's kind of... What would I say this? It's kind of to pester you a little bit, but you had a question where it's like, hey, I've been looking online to find like a good tree sway thing for like my palms. And then I literally typed in like tree sway material, and then this is the first thing that I found on like Unreal Engine forums, you know? So here you go. This is the material. It is an old post. It's from 2015, but I think something like this can work. I don't think with the simple grass wind it's necessarily going to look that good, but you can still use it. I think what I used, God, I can't remember, but I think I did some like a little bit more math, not math heavy. I don't want to sound to make it sound intimidating, but I didn't use simple grass wind, but I literally took like the scale of the asset that you would point it at, and then you would do some like light math, and then it would basically take that as a mask, and then it will like bend it slowly. Because a simple grass wind is not going to look great on like a big tree, right? But there's probably some stuff you can find out there. Okay, then out of the way though, let's have a look at your other question. I think that was about the trees, right? So your question is, I'm not really happy with the tree leaves yet. What can I do to make them look better and more polished? Yeah. So let's talk about that. I think right now, the big thing that is missing is directionality, right? If you think about like how a tree and especially leaves are going to be, they're always going to be affected by gravity, right? So that means that if you can understand my drawing here, it's almost like this thing here is a canopy. Oh, don't want to be drawing on that. This like a sphere is a canopy, but then you kind of want to have like your little cards just angled on the sides and kind of like drooping down and then scaling up or down, right? Because that's gonna add like a bit more directionality to the whole thing. Because otherwise it just looks like it's random chaos, and I don't know. Personally, not that big of a fan of that just yet. So that would be my recommendation. You can potentially try to do this to do the two things at the same time, right? Because there might be a way to maybe have on the top the more chaotic stuff that you have going on right now, and then to the sides you have like a drooping like smaller cards or something like that, you know? I think a combination of the two can actually work. Right. The rest is looking cool though. I like the palms. The palms have like maybe a bit too intense subsurface scattering, or maybe there's like a fake light like quite close to it or something. But I do really like the look of them. Looking quite nice. Some improvements happening on the thatch as well. It's looking a bit more organic. The only thing that I would say is this boat like being really intense, like yellow. That just feels like it's a bit off, just because it feels like it's trying to pull your attention, but it doesn't really need to, because you want to be looking at like the giant, like cool teeth monster in the back, right? So I would potentially think about Yeah, maybe. Hmm. Okay. What I would try in my own work is I would see what I can do with foreground elements a bit more. And so maybe we have like a tree kind of like sticking out in the foreground. And what that is gonna do is basically got like a natural vignette around your scene. That can be like really helpful to kind of draw people into the scene a little bit more. And then maybe grab like this leafy boy and scale them up in the foreground so that it becomes like a big foreground kind of thing. Yeah, try and experiment with those elements. Obviously, what you want to be conscious of is that you don't want to interfere with existing things, right? Especially your focal point. You want to give that some space, but foreground elements could definitely work. Could definitely work. But yeah, that'll be my quick recommendation there. Let's see. Any other feedback on this environment is more than welcome. I kind of feel stuck at the moment. I'll be out of town today. Yeah, I kind of feel stuck at the moment. Yeah. I think a couple of tips, or like maybe a good tip that I'll give is if you're stuck and you kind of don't know what to do. Well, this kind of comes in late, but what I try to do with my environments is I'll take like a daily screenshot. I mean, you have them for Wednesday, and you can kind of look and see through previous iterations to see if there's like a hint of something that could be nice to still incorporate in the final environment, right? I think other than that, have a play in Photoshop. Like do some quick like post-processing, like try to paint in like some highlights and some contrast to kind of see what you can do really quickly, right? And then try to implement some of that into Unreal Engine again. And the rest of it is, yeah, just making the most out of the assets that you already have, right? For example, what I will say about the trees, right, is that you can tell that they're the same one. So can we maybe do something where we create like an additional variation? That's like pretty quick to do, especially on these two. Or maybe what we do is instead of having like two coming out at the same angle, maybe we cluster them together a little bit, and then we have like one coming out here to the sides, and then maybe another one, a little smaller one hanging out here. Yeah, and then maybe thinking about like the shape distribution a little bit more, right? Thinking about can I grab like one of these rocks and maybe scale it down and add some like areas that could be interesting. But yeah, I would definitely say think about the details or like go looking for references that you think could really drive this over the top, right? Go look at like shoreline references. Go look at some of these like places in the world where you have people living in like rural places, like on stilted houses and all that kind of stuff, you know? There's going to be some interesting things that you can learn from it. Because, for example, one thing that I can immediately see is, for example, on these rocks, right? Or basically anything that comes close to the water. We need to blend that somehow, right? Like have some like really nice moss or something like that. Like some of these moss clumps. And then maybe have like, I don't know, some like some slimy algae stuff growing onto these pillars. And then we can start like dressing up some of the other areas with that kind of stuff as well. Because now I think you've done a good job about recreating the concept. And now it actually becomes interesting to see how you take it to the next level, right? Like where do you push it further than the concept the concept does, right? So I would think about those elements, like water blending. Maybe there's too many similar shapes in a certain area, for example, these cliffs, right? Like try to introduce like some smaller shapes. Those little moss or algae patches, they could work like really nice, that you have like, I don't know, little algae hanging from like some of the rocks here, you know? Maybe draping over some of this stuff. And I would look if there is like an opportunity for you to reuse something, right? What I mean by that is maybe there's something that you can use from these leaves to kind of make it like a bit more algae looking or something like that, right? I don't know what you have in there, but yeah. Stuff like that could be cool to look into. I hope that was helpful. So let me recap that, right? So stuck. Number one was references, right? References are always good. Focus on blending. And at this point, attention to detail. And really like nitpick everything, right? Like the trees being pretty similar, the rocks being similar in shape. Like think about like how you can resolve that. Most of these are like easy fixes, right? But they definitely make a difference. Cool. Oh yeah, and then foreground elements, right? Nice. Thank you, Lily. Good looking progress. You're getting quite close to the end, you know? Now it's more about like, okay, how can we really put the polish into this environment, you know? But yeah, thank you. Good work, good work. Babu. Let's see. Is this your work, Babu? Sorry, I have to see if we can match up names on Discord with names on YouTube. Let's see. We'll just do this one then. Oh, David Draw. Oh, is this you, David? I think we skipped a couple of people then. I have no clue who Babu is in our lineup today. No, wait, I know. No, there we go. Okay, sorry, David. We'll get to your work in a bit. Here we go, Babu. Okay, so I have one general question. What do you think of the current blockout? Does the composition feel strong and interesting, or is there anything else that stands out? Okay, compositioning-wise, I think it's really nice, you know? Very serene. Very somber. I wonder if we can push what we can do to push the contrast, right? Because I think this is also looking at my screen, right? So let me verify on the stream as well. I think just giving it like a little bit more contrast is going to be helpful. That just makes it pop a little bit more, right? Because otherwise it doesn't feel, it feels almost like there's like a gray plane on top of the whole image. So I would increase the contrast, push it a bit more forward. We don't want to destroy the mood, right? And we also want to slightly lighten it up. But I think the composition overall is pretty good. I would potentially say that this stuff here, like this branch with the idol on top of it. Think about the rule of thirds again, right? What I would do is probably put that a little bit higher so that this idol is here. Right? And then hanging from like a branch of this tree here. That's what I would do. Because then what happens, I mean, we can move the branch up a little bit more, but that's for you to decide. Because then what happens is that we create like a little bit more of a dynamic link between the two, right? Because otherwise they're just at the same point. And now it creates like a more dynamic composition, right? Because I need to look in a couple more places. I also have the feeling that we need to push out some of the elements a little bit. At least, I don't know. We actually have like a grid here somewhere. No, I don't think so. Oh, we kind of have this though. Yeah. I can actually use that for next time. Yeah, so we're getting close. I would push a shrine more to the left. And then the idol needs to come in a little bit more, right? So we're kind of shifting everything to the left a little bit more. But I would definitely have the idol like higher on the screen rather than really low. Because what that almost creates is we're then just looking at like the bottom half of our screen, and then the rest of it doesn't really have that big of an importance, right? So we need to fix that. We need to make sure that we use the most of our canvas. So we need to move the idol up. Yeah. Very good point. And this is more like a subtle thing, but I like the way that you've got your highlight coming onto the the god ray coming down from the ceiling, right? I would try to do something interesting with that god ray, like break it up with like an invisible branch or something like that, so that you have multiple god rays, because that looks a little bit more interesting. I think you've already done something here where the shape of it is broken up, but it would be more interesting to potentially have, I don't know, like a little sliver coming in here still, and then maybe like some additional slivers coming down here or something. So that we basically put some like fake shadow casters like up in the ceiling to help with that. But overall, really good though. I really like this scene. Really nice and condensed. Like it. Right. Yeah, thank you, Babu. Thank you for sharing your work. Always cool to see. Yeah, say nice one, Babu. Exactly. Exactly. Right. Let's keep the show on the road. Thank you, Babu. Thank you for sharing. I think next one is then Jack of Diamonds, and then we'll go to you, David. Jack of Diamonds. I've made a couple of notes here already. I think the scene is going into a really nice direction. I like where it's going so far. I do really like the look of the concept though. Like how moody and like muted in colors it is, but it still has like a nice subtle color complexity going on. I would potentially go more towards this color palette because it just looks more creepy and more, I don't know, more interesting. Because if we look at, if I remove my scribbles, if we look at this this scene, it's very very gray, orange, browny, right? It doesn't really have like a lot of color contrast going for it, even if it is like very subtle. But you can even see here that you have warmer colors on the ground, and the rest of it is like blues and purples, you know? So there's like this nice color contrast, even though the saturation of those colors is like pretty muted. So think about that when you're developing your scene. But your questions. Let's see. Oh, this is just like a random thing that I wrote. So the composition is good. Keep your focus on the focal point, right? Because you started adding like all these candles and stuff. Make sure that the intensity of the candles that are not relevant to your focal point, that they are less intense than your main focal point, right? That's a nice way of just like indicating like, hey, look, focus there rather than here. Because otherwise these become distracting, right? These two specifically. You don't want these two to take away from your main focal point. We don't want that to happen. Don't lose the creepy mood. I think there's a lot of fog and cool, creepy stuff happening here. That could be cool. And especially when you have a scene like this that it's going to be using fog. Oh my god, that is such a blessing. Because with fog cards and like volumetric fog and all that kind of stuff, you can really artistically direct where you want people to look. It's so cool. It's so cool. It really elevates your work. Especially with a scene like this. Now, actually to your question, you're talking about the path, right? And you're saying that it looks a bit uniform, and then you try to add those stones on top of it to make it less uniform. But I'll tell you one thing, that like if you have a uniform path and then you want to break up that uniformity, adding uniform stones on top of it is also not going to work, right? And you know what this comes down to? This comes down to the way that you've painted your path at this point. Because if we do a comparison, right? So if I paint my path here, that's your path, right? Can you see what the issue is already? Because this path is like it is pretty uniform, right? So what I would say, and actually your concept has a pretty good indication of this, you can see that there's like almost no defined path. It is just like a couple of pools and then connecting pathway between it, right? And I think that's a good indication of something to chase. So what I did in my overpaint is I said like, thinking about the drainage, right? So where does water go? Because that can be like a really good indication of how you need to sculpt your terrain, right? Because the painting and your terrain itself, they work hand in hand. So what could be really cool is that you have this shallow part here. So that's going to be a large pool of standing water with like a deep puddle here, right? So that can just be like a decal, which are like super simple to make. And then it kind of peters out to nothing. And then there's like another pool, because maybe this piece of the terrain here, right? So this piece of the terrain here is like maybe slightly higher than the rest of it. So it pushes the two pools apart, right? And then you do the same thing here. And you get some really nice benefits from doing this, because you add a little bit of complexion to your terrain. So it's not just like flat, which is nice. And then you paint your terrain with that in mind. And that creates like this really believable terrain that you have. Right. So that's what I would do. And then what you then do, then you add like a couple of stones here and there. But we don't want to add stones everywhere. Because what we can do with stones, for example, in this little scene, is we just say like, hey, look, there's going to be a stone path. Let's say over here. Right? And then the stone path like goes into the water, kind of gets broken up, and then it's like, it's done, right? It's gone again. And then maybe we have like a single stone here, and then maybe there's like a single stone, like a bigger one that's kind of revealed here. But you don't need to have stones everywhere to indicate that there was a path before, right? So add them sparingly and just add them as little hints. Think of if you go to like a really old, I don't know, a really old park or a really old cemetery, or I don't know, something like that. think about how that would look like, right? Look at some references, and a lot of them are gonna have like these really old, like, I don't know, almost cobblestone paths, and parts of it is just gonna be buried under grass and dirt because no one maintains it, right? Same thing is gonna be happening here. So, and if you then make all these elements like more unique and more more separated, I think they have a better opportunity to stand apart from the rest, right? And that's also what is interesting about the concept, right? You have a path because you almost see like this is very like hilly terrain almost, right? But you kind of go into the scene and then there's like a little pool here, and then you go further and there's like a little pool here, and then you go into like a tomb, right? So yeah, that's what I would do. But yeah, thinking about the drainage and really thinking about like how water flows, right, is really, really helpful in creating really believable terrain. For example, that's why I called this out as like really being a big pool, because once you have a big pool and then indicating like a puddle in the middle of it with a decal, that's going to be super believable, right? And that's where you have the strength of your terrain painting and a decal on top of it, really working nicely in tandem, right? Yeah, nice. But yeah, cool stuff. Cool scene. I like what I'm seeing. I love the terrain texture, like the paint that we're seeing here already. Yeah. Cool stuff. Oh, last thing that I'll say here, just because I just thought about it, is, I mean, this is not a bad way of going about it, right? But this is the terrain. This is the terrain texture that works in one dimension, right? So if you paint a path or you draw a spline, it works. But as soon as the path curves into another side, let's say my path does this, but I want this muddy texture here, that doesn't work, right? So on a terrain texture, what we do is we probably have a split between the two, right? We probably have this very muddy terrain, and then this very, I don't know, let's say sand, right? And then through height blending, you just blend the two together, right? And if you feel that transition is too strong, that just means that you need like another layer in between. But yeah, just wanted to call that out as well. Hopefully that helps. Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Hello, David. Okay, we finally got to your work. Let's see, your working on a facade project. I'm just finishing my wall texture. I'd love to get some feedback before moving on to the next step. Nice. Okay, first of all, this looks great. I like what I'm seeing. There is this weird little thing happening with the lighting on the edges, where I don't know if that's just like a weird lighting bug, or if that is like your roughness having the wrong values to the roughness or the normals. I don't know. I would look into why that is happening, because that looks a bit off to me. Anyway, the rest of it looks really good. I would say the main thing that I'm missing is some smaller surface detail. So things like very, I don't know, recognizable like normal detail, right? Because you can kind of see that there's a lot of grunge to these tiles, where your tiles feel like they have that grunge, but it's too small in scale, so you can barely recognize it. I want to see some medium breakup as well. Yeah, I think the colors are good. Maybe it kind of depends. We'll have to look at that in the scene, right? Because that's always the main important thing whenever you make textures. You have to look at them in the scene, because that's the final thing that matters. But yeah, looking good so far. And then you had these questions about your environment, right? I wrote the differences in the wall, but I'm not sure about the approach, especially about the black part on the first reference that I want to add in the final environment. The black part in the first... Oh, I see. This reference over here. Yeah. Okay. Those are some good questions. Quickly breaking this down is you have this like more saturated version, and then you have like a dirty version here. You could actually potentially do both of them with some overlays or some saturation adjustments in the material itself, right? So for example, you set up a vertex paint material and it samples the same texture inputs, but then you just add like a saturation little node setup in your material that allows you to like change the saturation, and you just assign that to a different vertex color. So I don't know, your base material could be the red color, your saturated version could be the green color, and then your dirty version could be the blue color, right? Maybe for the dirty one, you can make a separate material, but I would always look if you can save yourself additional texture inputs by actually making an overlay or a multiply or something like that within your texture setup. And then for the actual black parts, so we have like this black little, I don't know, I don't even know what that is because it looks like weirdly straight. Looks like some moisture soot. I don't know. But yeah, if you want to do something like that, that's where for both of these things, you can add decals, right? So you have one decal that is more like this leaky kind of grungy stuff. And then because you're using that material already, you can basically just, you can even use the same decal potentially, just kind of scaling it down just a little bit to kind of make it work. But if not, you can just turn them both into a decal. I think that works 100%, especially for the small scale scene like this. You potentially want to add more decals and make it look really, really nice and get a lot of detail out of using decals compared to trying to do it with vertex painting. So yeah, decals is a good approach. I like that a lot. And for this, I would try material first. If that doesn't work or it's too technical, then just do it with a texture. That's also fine. Cool. What was this? Oh, this is like a tiny thing. Whenever you have these bricks, right, where you see the information go from like one brick to another, that indicates that it either happened after the wall was already there, but that's highly unlikely. Or you just have to separate all the information out between the individual tiles and kind of spread them around a bit more. I think overall it's looking pretty good though, but there's like a couple of places where you can see like the continuation of like the cracks, for example, which always looks like pretty unnatural. So that would be like a minor thing to take into account as well. Cool. Thanks, Adu. I appreciate it. Really, really good looking stuff. I'm curious to see how this environment is going to come along. I think it's really nicely chosen. I love stuff like this. So yeah, keep us up to date. Right. Who do we have next? So Quinten. Oh, Quinten is on screen already. Hello, Quinten. Good to see ya. Quinten is working on a mountain shrine. Having trouble with the layout, specifically the rocks behind the instance spot. I can't figure out if they are in front of the entrance or way in the background. I personally think that they are in the background. So you basically have your tower first. And this is where we as an environment artist have to try to translate the 2D into the 3D, right? And sometimes the perspective might be a little bit off. But I read this as it's behind it. That's the way that I would construct it. Because to me, I don't know, to me it almost makes sense that if you are standing in front of the shrine, that the way that you offer your tribute to the shrine is by burning an incense candle, right? Which means that like your incense candle needs to be somewhere over here. in the scene, right? For it to be directly correlated to the scene. But I think what might be nice in this case is that we deviate away from the concept just a little bit, perhaps, and then just say, okay, if we move the instance, if let's say this is where the instance is going to be, right? Maybe we take a couple of those stones and then we build like a little small path towards it, right? So that we increase the importance of the instance. Because that is like a nice little indication of just like, you know, like leading you towards it. We can see like a little path going up to the instance. And then this is like the rock with the instance on. I would probably even put it slightly closer as well. But that's the way that I would approach it. I would try to make it more cohesive and push the elements a little bit closer together so that they feel as one. That's what I would do. Yeah. You know what? Now that I'm looking at this, I might even be inclined to do something like this. Where you as a person are coming from behind the rock. You're kind of coming up this hill. And then you're paying your tribute, right? Because we're seeing this house in the back. So that leads me to think that there's almost like a path that comes up here. And then curves around to pay like tribute here. Because that also helps us compositionally, right? And then the only thing that we have to do is like get rid of this and kind of, I don't know, maybe have it here instead. Right, so a little bit more in the background. Yeah, I think that flows really nice, where this rock kind of has like this curve to it, and then you take like the staircase up here. I think that works pretty well, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a cool looking concept though. I do like it. Cool. And then your second question was, any tips to do the ground? That was your second question, right? If you're doing the ground, I would try to separate it into like multiple meshes. So let's say these like on the edge, right? Those are all like rock sculpts. And then the rest in between is honestly just like a mesh. It can just be a mesh. It doesn't need to be landscape. With a mesh, you have the benefit of having additional resolution, right? Where a landscape is usually lower resolution. So that gives you like a little bit more flexibility in terms of like, I don't know, the nice little elements where you want to carve in like a little divot next to a rock or something like that. That gives you some flexibility there. And then just a tileable or two, right? Some grass and, I don't know, some dirt or something like that. And then just dress it up with some meshes. And then dress the side up with like some rocks on the side. That's what I would do. Yeah. Cool stuff, cool stuff. This is a cool looking scene, Quentin. I think it's a great choice. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff to do, right? Like there's a lot of ambitious, there's a lot of variety happening in the scene. So I would, depending on where you are in your career, right? As in like how far along you are on your artistic journey. There is flexibility in the scene where you can cut out like the rest of it, right? And just make it a diorama. So maybe that would be a good thing to focus on and then build out. But yeah, cool looking scene. keen to follow the progress. So keep us up to date. Let's see, who do we have next? Guillaume. Guillaume is next. Right. I think I was I was in the middle of making your notes. So let's see. The first question was about the modular kit, right? So how to make efficient textures. So I broke this down for you already. Where I think you were overthinking this a bit too much because you mentioned multiple UV sets and all that kind of stuff, right? I think we can simplify this, and this entire asset could be, let's see. If this is all just tileable textures and trim sheets, you just need one UV, and then you separate all of the areas that you've noted down here into separate material slots. So this is what I've done here, right? So in total, you would end up with 4 materials because you have your plaster, which is a tileable, you have your top tileable, you have these 3, which is a trim sheet, right? So that's 1 material. Which is good. And then you have your bottom tileable, right? So that means that you have, each asset is going to have 4 material slots that you can assign, and then you just need like 1 UV to take care of all of it. So that's pretty simple. No need to overthink it, and then you can just, UV freely. Only taking into account the tileables. Wait, so here's the limit with triplanar projection. Oh, is that what you're talking about here? If I use UV projection with the right islands, I lose the power of the triplanar projection to control the size and the alignments of the patterns. Wait, but what if this is just a tileable? Why don't you just like unwrap this as like a normal tileable? Because you can still control like the scaling of your actual tileable, but you don't really want to do that. You want to control your tiling by scaling your UVs, right? That's how you control your tiling. So instead of trying to control your tiling in Substance Painter in this case, you would control your tiling by like scaling your UV islands. That's the way that I would control it. Because ideally, also, you don't really want to... You want to scale your UV islands to remain consistent throughout like all your assets, basically, right? That's where textile density comes in, and that's why that's important. But let's see. Yeah, so for something like this, you would control... control your texture size with your UVs, right? And keep in mind like textile density. Like I said, with a previous artist that we talked about today, doing textile density for tileable textures is actually the easiest thing to do, because you literally just type in, hey, this is my texture resolution for my map. This is how much textile density I want, and you just press a button, and it takes care of it for you, and then you're good. And you don't have to take care about it anymore. Let's see. What is your second question? So the second is about the lighting. May I have some advice and feedback about the lighting, please? I tried to improve the texturing of the lanterns. Cool. With a touch of bloom. Okay, so this is the one with bloom, right? And this is the one without bloom. I like what's happening here because you can actually see color complexity becoming way more interesting, right? This scene feels way more full, a bit softer because of the bloom and all that kind of stuff, right? But I would focus on something like this rather than something like this, because this doesn't have depth, this doesn't have volume, right? Let's have a look. So let's see if we can try some stuff here. What can we do really quickly? Don't really want to increase contrast too much. I think the only thing that I don't like about this lighting is that it's overshadowing a lot of the orange. It's almost like it's putting a blue filter on top of everything, right? Now that I'm looking at it, so... yeah, so let's make some notes before I forget. That looks good, but it almost has like the blue filter effect, right? So we need to be careful about that. Yeah, I do like where this is going. I would still say more focus. It's not too bad, but more focus on the foreground, right? By reducing the intensity of the lights in the background. But I think we're not too far off. I think we're actually like in a pretty decent position. So yeah. I think this is looking pretty good. Right. Cool. Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you. Say best of luck with future updates. Let's see. Oh, did we skip someone? Oh no, I'm just losing my mind. That is... oh no, I am losing my mind. We've already looked at you, Quentin. Yeah, interesting. Oh my god. Chai Shield. Let's see. Chai Shield. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was looking straight past it. Well, you had an interesting feedback request, right? Because you basically said like, hey, look, I'm done with modeling. So I'm not gonna address any of them, but feel free to say them anyway. Which is kind of like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that a little bit? But let's see. I'm gonna approach this from like a story perspective again, right? Where especially for this thing, where you have this like really cool damage that occurred on top of the asset, right? How do we make it feel more like it was damaged, right? Like, was it molten? Was it damaged by like falling into it? Like, how did that damage occur? Because that can actually be like really cool to showcase. Because, for example, like if something fell through it, then I would expect to see the mesh to be like bent inwards or like warped a little bit, right? If it was molten, then we would see that in the texturing, right? And maybe a little bit more in the mesh where we can actually see the deformation of the molten plastic a little bit. Because this feels, it's almost broken off too clean. Like I'm expecting to see some more, like a bit more of an effect of actual damage that happened on the asset here. And then the next thing here that I'll say is the strips of tape. They do feel a little bit too clean as well. And this is especially because this is sort of like a MacGyver kind of setup, right? Where you have like all the things duct taped and wire wrapped and all that kind of stuff to it. And then the tape is actually pretty well maintained because normally the edges start like fraying off and, you know, like you have like these edges like coming off of it and like fraying up a little bit. Those details would actually like on a couple of edges would actually look like pretty nice. And you just pick like 1 or 2 or 3 edges somewhere and then you have those. That's all you need. Yeah. But the rest of it does look cool though. I really like it. I do like it visually so far. So yeah, cool stuff. I think tension here is quite well done. Something that I love to think about is where the tension goes on like all these wires, for example, right? I think these two make a lot of sense. This one is where I'm starting to ask, like, this could make sense, that could make sense, but then it kind of goes around this. So that kind of feels like it's kind of flimsy in terms of tension, or it would like slip underneath it. It would almost feel like, okay, if this is like really wrapped tightly against it, then I would expect almost this to be a straight line. And then this would come, this little module would come on top of it. You know, so it's almost like the module is kind of like slapped onto the wire. But yeah. Cool. But that's about the only thing that I can say. I think the rest of it is like looking really nice. Yeah, so keep on going. I'm curious where the texturing is gonna go, you know? So keep it up, and I'm curious to see where this is gonna go. Who do we have next? Abe? I don't think you're in the list though, are you? I think we're just gonna go freeform at this point, if I'm not mistaken. Did I make some notes here? No, I think these are all just still for me to do. Okay, Top G, let's have a look. At this stage, I'm finishing any assets I had on the first pass before moving on to the texture creation stage. Is there anything? Basically nothing. I mean, if there was anything, I would have probably flagged it like the weeks before, right? So I don't think there's anything for me to flag up at this stage that is like really poking my eye out. So I would say it's all good to go. Keep it up and then keep making improvements along the way. So I think we're in a good place, buddy. And then the second one is more on like the technical side. The last two pictures is highlighting a door wall that is reused. Oh yeah, that's the stuff up here, right? So this door is reused in a different section of the scene, but there's a little gap here. So how do we fix that? There's a couple of ways, right? If this wall tiles into this wall, we can't really do any scaling, right? Because that's going to break the continuity between the two surfaces. Usually with more plaster type of materials, you can usually get away with it. So that's not that big of a deal. But as long, yeah, if there's no seam there, then, or if you don't want to have a seam, then scaling it is not really going to work. So in this case, we might have to just hide it with another asset. So that could be like a quick fix where you just, I don't know, you slap like a wooden beam into it, or maybe you make like a little sliver of like another piece of wall or something like that, right? That could help there as like a temporary fix. But I will say that it is weird to me that this wall and that wall have a tiny amount of difference, because I would almost expect your walls to be the same sort of height across the entire scene. So it is kind of weird that this is happening, but honestly, this is easily fixable by, I don't know, adding another piece of geometry in the way, or maybe scaling it up and down if you can. So that would be my thing, because it's not that big of a deal. So let's see. Ba-da-ba-bum. Oh, did I read it correctly? Let's see. So highlighting a door while reused on the right side, but it needs to be taller to be at the same height as the one beside it. If I do, it will poke to the second floor on the left side. Is that fine? It would poke on the second floor to the left. Well, the thing that I would just do is just scaling it just slightly, right? Like if you scale it like on one axis, I think that's all you need. Or you could scale this one down on one axis, and that's probably going to be all you need to do, right? Because your concern is that we see like the top of this wall basically poking through here, right? And I think that is a concern for like gameplay reasons. Obviously, for your scene, if you're not gonna put a camera there or something like that, right? It doesn't matter if you're not gonna show it off. But if you wanna, if you want to showcase that angle for some reason, then yeah, it needs to be clean. But I mean, if you're asking the question of like, hey, in this thing that you can't see, is that okay if I leave it there? Yes. Literally all we do in games, right? There's so much jank in games. As long as it's not visible, no one cares. No one cares. It just needs to be good for gameplay, right? So, yeah. Pretty easy fix. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. Right. Shahid is coming back with this. Oh my god, it's been 6 months since we last seen this. Oh my god. I wasn't expecting to see that timeline difference. Oh, that makes me scared for how quick time goes. Especially color and contrast is something I'm struggling with, or is it something else? I'm a little bit confused. I'm not sure if I have to add more dirt, especially in the wall or the floor. I mean, so a good test to see if contrast actually helps is just doing it, right? Like try to add like a little bit of contrast to your scene to see if that really helps it. And a quick way here could just be like dunk. Let's maybe I don't want these values to clip, right? So maybe that's a bit too much. Let's see, what else we can do? Nah, we don't want to do the highlights. Because to be fair, that's already like pretty strong. This light. So I think doing stuff like this can give you an idea, right? So let's do a one-to-one comparison. It's a tiny bit more contrasty, but I don't really mind where yours is at, honestly, like looking at it again. But what you definitely can do, and I remember saying this a while ago, that you have to be careful with how intense your individual lights are. So for example, in this screenshot, right? All these lights are like way too strong. Because what you can do, if we go back to, I think this guy, and we'll duplicate it again, and we'll see if this works now. still doesn't work. Is my burn brush just like screwed up? I'm so confused. I don't know why this is not working anymore. I have no clue. Oh well. Because what I was gonna say is this light also takes away from the attention of this light, right? So and then maybe the light that you have here, right? If you dim that down slightly, just slightly, right? We don't have to do too much, but then we're pushing people more here. And then we can also be like a little bit more subtle with the lighting here potentially, because I do think that actually this light, just from like the light coming in, feels like really intense. It almost feels like there's a spotlight coming from the outside coming in. So that gives us like more flexibility to like reduce this light as well. And that means that the whole scene is going to be a bit more balanced, right? Because I feel like everything is turned up to like a very high amount currently. Because this is pretty intense, like moonlight that we have. I'm almost imagining that it's like a very subtle, like a very soft kind of moonlight coming in, right? Compared to something that's really harsh. Also, a tiny thing here, if you have something like this is where I'm going to be looking, right? That's where my focus is going because there's so much contrast. It's so intense that I'm not even focusing on all the cool stuff that's happening here. So yeah, be careful to be very specific with where you add the lights. It's going to be very helpful. Yeah, cool. And then you were saying, do I have to add dirt or something on the walls and the floor? I don't think so. It looks like it's pretty clean, right? Even though there's like signs of a little bit of hoarder mentality and kind of stuff. So maybe you could add like slight paint peeling and stuff, and maybe like a little bit of dirt. But it's again, it's a story, right? If this is a person who has passed away like a long time ago, maybe so. If you're trying to get this like really chaotic feel of like, oh, the guys are drunk, like the carpet is kind of messy, the chair is kind of dirty, then maybe the scene could use like a little bit more dirt, right? But it's about the consistency that you create within the scene based on the story, right? That's the most important thing. So yeah, I would what I would recommend, looking at some of the floor stuff here, is looking at your roughness. Because it feels it's either roughness or like normal map information. It feels like the normal is like really intense. And that gives you like this like intense shine on the floor, but that's like not common on like a polished floor like this. Cool. Thanks, Shahid. Welcome back. It's good to see you again. Keep on refining the scene. We're nearly there. Right, and then we have sleeper takes, sleeper stakes. Let's see. I decided I'm probably going to press on with this project simply because the amount of work I have to do to create a smaller version I think would actually be more than what I've got left to do. Okay, fair enough. However, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks until the end of next week. Okay. deadline time. If I can't get it done, then I'll come back another time because I want to move on. I got a couple of different compositions from the first angle. I like getting more of the foliage path in, but I feel like the tree is a little bit awkward. Are you talking about this one? Because yeah, this doesn't look that great, but I mean, so I like this guy the most, right? Because we get the most amount of depth, where this is just like, oh, this is just midground and background, right? Here we get a foreground, midground, and background. There needs to be some rebalancing that needs to happen here, but I think this one is the most interesting one. I think we said that a couple of times, right? So this is still my favorite one, just because there's more visual layering happening. I started a high poly sculpt of the golem. I think I'm going to keep it fairly basic and have the moss from the ground growing on the golem. What I think is the next most important thing after getting some basic texturing on the golem, maybe some background mountains. We set this in our chat, right? Focus on the focal point. So the thing where you want to invest most of your time is this. Make this look as good as possible. Because honestly, the background terrain, let's say these little triangles that you want to replace, right? That's super simple. You just, I don't know, you just grab like a little terrain chunk, you just duplicate that over, you just scatter like a bunch of trees on top of it, and then you have like your new terrain in the background, right? That honestly should be like a job that takes you like an hour maybe. Just like refine the background. But that's not where it's at, right? That's not where the money is in this shop. You want to focus all your attention here. Because if you're just doing the sculpt of the golem and it's gonna be overgrown by moss, you gotta give me some more, man. Story, right? Story. We keep hammering on it, right? But like, why is this here? Who was this for? Why is this overgrown? Like, do the people that worship this person, this golem, are they no longer alive? Maybe it's a pilgrimage shrine, you know? Like, you have to tell me something about this. It can't just be like this random unexplained thing that just has like moss grown on top of it, right? So what is this? Who was it for? Who was it built by? Why is it here? You know, like ask those questions. Like ask those questions and try to relate them to the story, and then build one or two cool assets that can give me like a deeper insight into what the story is, right? That's what I would say. And then really focus your attention here, right? Like in a couple of streams ago, we talked about this as well. Like look at big, medium, small, right? Like have like a big rock, a medium rock, and then some like small pebbles next to it. Sculpt like a couple of pebbles. Maybe if you want to draw some extra attention to like this person here, like this golem, maybe there's just like a bunch of flowers growing next to him, right? And then maybe this is the only place, or like the main place where people still come and they still worship this thing, but it's like it's old, so like a part of it is like slightly broken. But that could be cool, right? Like make it a shrine of pilgrimage, but it's like halfly overgrown, so there's only a couple people a year that come to see it. But give me something more that I can latch onto, right? But yeah, I think this one also has potential actually. I think both of these are like pretty good when it comes to the composition, foreground, medium, middle ground, and background, right? And then this one is more like the follow-up image that you give, where you go all into the story, right? I think if you just do this one, that would be fine. Or if you do a sequence, oh, sorry. If you do a sequence, then it's like number 1 here and then number 2 here, right? So it's like a little lead up between the two. But yeah, that's where I would put my attention. Just like anything. So if we're gonna zoom in on an area, right? How are we gonna do this? Okay, I'll give you a couple of areas. Purple, priority number 1. Right? And then we go to, I don't know, greenish. There's already a lot of green in this scene. Yellow. That's your secondary zone, right? That's what you want to make look really good next up. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe, no. We're going to keep it small. So that's your secondary zone. And then we go to, let's say, something like this. And then the rest of it is basically number 4, right? But you want to focus on, you want to make sure that like 1 is where we have a lot of value, 2 needs to be in support of 1, and then 3 is more like background already. But because the way that you've got it light up at the moment, and the way that this background, this specific section looks, I would spend some more time in like blocking this out and making this look like a nice riverbed or something, right? Because that is still relevant to the scene. But the rest of it is all background terrain, and yeah, should be pretty much done pretty quickly. Cool. Thank you, Super Sticks. And then last but not least, we have Ilyash. Our Ilya. I'm close to finishing my work and I need some final notes on the set dressing and lighting. Is there anything that I can improve in terms of material or shading? I'm going to be annoying here. And I'm going to come out of the gate swinging. But I'm going to give you one note. Because you can't decide between the blue and the pink lighting, right? But you need to make a choice. You need to make a choice in which lighting scenario you're going to use. Do not discard the other one, right? I think keeping 2... I mean, keeping 2 on your personal hard drive is fine, right? But for your portfolio, I want you to see to make a choice, right? Because what I want to see is, let's say this is like your portfolio post, right? Let's make it a little bit slimmer. Let's say this is your entire portfolio post. All of this stuff is your main lighting, right? You know, you have one image that is just like, oh, alternative light. That's maybe what you can do. But I still don't think that this one is as strong as this one, right? But I'm giving you the option. If you want to have both in your portfolio, you will need to choose which one is going to be number 1 and which one is going to be number 2. Because, for example, if you have this amount of stuff on your portfolio and then you still have to do the breakdowns, you are not being decisive enough about where you showcase where the value is that you bring to the table, right? Because sure, it can be really interesting to, for example, you show me all of this stuff with the main screenshot, right? That's cool. But I don't want to see like duplicates of like all the screenshots that you've done before with a different lighting scenario, right? That's not what I want to see. That's not what brings value to your portfolio. So that's the thing. Choose one and then show one image of an alternative lighting scenario, right? But be pretty decisive with that. So is there anything that I can improve in terms of material or shading? So let's focus on these guys. I mean, there's probably stuff that you could still adjust and still improve, right? But I think we're at a stage in the project where you want to finish it up and post it, right? And I think that's honestly better to do than to keep spinning wheels and then see how you can improve for the next project, right? Because sometimes there also needs to be a point where you say like, hey, look, this is like the value that I would get from doing a bunch of iterative work at the end of a project is probably not going to be as valuable as when you do it in the beginning of a project, right? Because you learn way more when you are focused on like a single thing rather than trying to squeeze in as much at the end. Yeah, if there's like a couple of things that I would say immediately, right, is, and you can decide whether you want to take that into this environment or not, right? A couple of things. So the shader on the main focal point, that outline shadery stuff that you got going on, looks a little bit weird. It's almost like there's almost something wrong with the material because the rest of the scene actually looks pretty uniform or like pretty consistent by contrast, right? Next thing what I would say, and this is more like a set dressing thing, is if you're doing something like this, right? If you make like a little camp, give it some space. Right? Paint a little bit of like dirt material underneath the terrain. Make sure that there's like enough space for actually a little bit of rest versus detail, right? But yeah, I'm gonna keep it to those two. I think overall the environment and the lighting and the colors that you used are actually like pretty effective. And I think this is a really cool project. I'm just really curious to see how you're going to start your next one. And then we can start the process of feedbacking like a little bit earlier in the process rather than so late. But yeah, really cool stuff, Ilya. Really cool to see you join us, and yeah, a really impressive scene to come in swinging with. Right. And that's it for this week. Again, I will say thank you all so much for showing up, being here the whole time. I really appreciate it. I know this was, it's been a very tiring day, so it's probably been like a little bit less energetic than usual, but hopefully you still learned something out of it in the end. And for the people that participated, I will share this overpaint in our Discord, which if you are not in a Discord, feel free to join it. It's awesome. You get a free book. You get access to like a bunch more content. So yeah, feel free to do that as well. And for those who do, thank you for the support. But yeah, that's going to be me for today. I will see you all on Friday. And if you have any game recommendations that you want to share me from Steam Next Fest, feel free to throw them over, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll play a game together. That sounds pretty fun. All right, I'll see you on Friday. Have a nice evening all.